Hi, Zizaran here with another build guide for the upcoming Scourge League, and this is a collab with DsLily, and this is going to be a Necromancer Detonate Dead, one of the builds that is like a staple Lily build, and she places so much, so you know it's a really good build. And this might be what Lily is league starting with, so if she is, you can go and ask your questions. This is something that's done really well in races for her as well, so it's a solid build. So basically, this is exploding the corpses of your enemies, and a really big benefit with this for the upcoming league is that there's a lot of monster life on the new mechanic. And, well, we're kind of bypassing that because we're using enemy monster life as our damage. So at least that part is not going to affect us a lot. As normal, we have a step-by-step skill tree in Path of Building. So you can see that we have normal lab, cruel lab, etc. And you can see exactly where to put skill points as you're leveling. And there's not that much of a respec required. We have a skill tree without and with a glorious vanity, and the glorious vanity gives you corrupted soul. This is a legion timeless jewel, and corrupted soul basically gives you a bigger buffer of your life as extra energy shield. And we also have a level 100 tree if you do grind that hard. So for leveling this build, early on you're just using freezing pulse, but as soon as you level 4 you have Stormblast Mine and Orb of Storms. And you're basically putting down Orb of Storms and then spamming Stormblast Mine inside of that. Once you hit level 28, it's going to swap to Armor Brand and Cremation, and you'll use Desecrate to get corpses before bosses. You're mostly running around spamming Armor Brand. You're not using Brand Recall, there's not really much of a point, so you're basically just tapping Armor Brand around on monsters. And the Cremation is only for really tanky, rarest, unique monsters and the bosses that you're killing while getting to maps. So if you want, you can use Flesh Offering for going faster and getting the movement speed from that. But you can also, if you really want to be more tanky, you can use Bone Offering as well. Herald of Ash helps a little bit with clearing, and Purity of Elements will give you Ailment Immune in 3.16. Now early on, you do want to use all your Wild Orbs to try to get a Val Detonate Dead. The level isn't actually that important on this, but do try to get it early. Val DD is sort of nerfed a little bit in 3.16. It's a little bit sad because Elemental Overload has been changed, that it's very specifically, like you can't use, for example, a Storm Brand to activate Elemental Overload for other skills anymore. It's only for the skill that crits in the last 8 seconds. Sadly, and hopefully this gets changed at some point, but this is the same for Val DD. So if the first hit of the Val DD isn't a crit, well, it's not going to. And that means that, yeah, it's a bit of a damage nerf on the Val Detonate Dead, but it is still a decent amount of damage. So in this setup, we're also going to be using the Trinity support gem. We're using Desecrate on Spellslinger, and the reason for that is that when we're actually then using Frenzy, that will also have cold damage on it. You get this cold damage either from like the wand, you can get it on a glove or a ring. It just needs to have any cold damage on it, so Frenzy is dealing cold damage. And that means we're basically going to get max damage out of Trinity. It's going to be like fully powered at all times. And that is a very big support gem. We're using Tempest Shield, that's for spell block. And then we have Determination, Defiance Banner, and Herald of Ash at the end game. So Molten Shell you can have on left click until you get a Flammability Ring. Once you have a Flammability Ring, you'll have a little bit more like less socket pressure. So you can do Molten Shell on a cast when damage taken setup to like proc when you're taking big bursts of damage. And for those that don't know, you can have any instant skill on your mouse button 1 instead of your move only, and you should definitely not have default attack there. And it'll basically auto cast whenever it's off cooldown. We're using Wave of Conviction, Bone Offering, and Flammability. So you're basically on a boss, you would cast Flammability and Wave of Conviction. So you can self-cast Bone Offering if you like it, or if you're a little bit more lazy, you can do it on cast or damage taken. This is okay on softcore especially. On hardcore, there is the risk that you'll get hit when it's down and get killed. And then obviously later on, once you get a trigger wand, then you can put Bone Offering in there and it'll automate itself. Very important thing for this build is going to be the raised Spectres, and you do want high level of those so that they don't die. For example, if they die at a boss, that is not very important because as long as the Spectre you're bringing in survives, it's in the instance, it's in the Desecrate pool, and that is the main reason we're bringing Spectre with us. So basically, we're bringing Spectres in to increase the HP pool of monsters we're detonating. A quick example would be that the monsters that are normally spawning in a map or at a boss could maybe have, let's say, 100% increased life or 150% increased life, or maybe as low as like 10 to 50. That is very low. The monsters that we're going to be bringing in, and all of this is like explained in the notes here as well, The monsters that we're going to be bringing in have 800% max life. This has gotten repeatedly nerfed, and it used to be that we could get monsters with 1500% increased life, and they would just be insane. You would like notice chunks go off the monster or off the bosses whenever these got exploded. So we're basically polluting or enhancing the monster life pool by bringing in these high HP Spectres. So for early game gear set, what that would look like, early on you could use, for example, +1 fire spell skill. That's really good for armor brand. But a really good thing with this build is that we're getting spiritual aid, and that means that you can use a fair essence and any increases to minion damage. So for example, a shrieking fair with 60 or 70% increased minion damage, that would literally be the same as, for example, 60% elemental damage or 60% damage. So that's a really powerful thing by having this node here. Other than that, increased fire damage is really important. Spell damage isn't that big for this build. It will increase your tooltip, but you got to remember that we're scaling the explosion, the corpse explosion part here. So fire, elemental damage, minion damage are all really good. An ideal spike shield, obviously, spell suppression is great, and getting life on block is huge. We're already getting some of this from Bone Offering, and the more you get, you're really going to notice that small monsters...
That was removed.
Wait, what?
They removed that off of Bone Offering.
Wait, entirely? For the shield, you just want to get spell suppression is obviously a very nice stat, and the closer we get to 100 spell suppression chance, the better. Another stat that is extremely strong and much more important now than it was before is getting a life on block shield. You can get this on a Shaper shield and Warlord, and just Reforge life is really good for getting these. The reason it's so much more important to get this is because Bone Offering used to have 600 life on block, and then obviously we get reduced effect, but 600 life on block, that is gone now, and it is 4% regen on block. So very big nerf there, sadly. Another thing that's really big, getting offering effect on your chest so that you're getting more block chance from your offering is really nice. And life as extra maximum energy shield is really nice for a buffer. Worm sign is really good for mapping and getting the rampage for going fast. But for doing bosses and things, you can just use a really beefy life glove. At Series Step, a really good source of spell suppression. Honestly, these are going to be super chased and super sought after. We're going to see a lot of people using those, and they're probably going to sell really well with enchants. And the Incursion Amulet, it will have a stat like, for example, fire damage, leeches his life, and 48% fire resist. This can also be swapped around with the Harvest Resist swap. So if you find one with cold or lightning leech, you can swap that over to fire. And you can look through the gear list and see some really good, like the idea of what to get for gear here. And for early, mid, and late game gear, Lily's made some really in-depth notes on how to craft and how to get the gear and what you're looking for at each stage. So make sure you check out the notes. That's also where you see things about Spectres, etc., as well as early level 1 crafts for leveling with Armageddon brand. Now, obviously we explained that Spectres are very important for the Necro DD build, and that's because we are like diluting the existing pool of really low HP monsters and adding our own very high HP ones. This is a very big damage change. Like, it's very big. So much so that, for example, a fight like the Shaper that has literally like probably 100 monsters that are all terrible HP. I don't think there's anything more unenjoyable than doing Shaper on this build. Now everything else is pretty okay, and you could bring in multiple high HP Spectres. So somebody maining this build might have 3 different Spectre banks. Well, what is the Spectre bank? So PvP characters have been disabled. So that means you need to level a character to level 28. And normally you just do a Witch. It's very quickly. And then you grab the +1 Spectre node once you get level 28. And you have a Desecrate and a Raise Spectre. Now this character can hold 2 Spectres. And you would then store your 2 highest Spectres on this character. Most people playing this would only have 1 Spectre bank. The reason for this is if you lose your Spectres in a map and can't get them back, getting them back the original way you got them might be a little bit annoying, whereas relogging to your Spectre bank and putting them in your hideout is a lot less work. So it's very worth having at least 1 Spectre bank with your 2 main Spectres on it. Again, just level a Witch, level 28, and grab the +1 Spectre node. So let's do the normal Q&A we do at the end of builds. Are there too many gems to equip? How is the socket pressure? Honestly, the socket pressure for this one's really bad. The easiest thing to drop if you don't have enough sockets is Molten Shell and then Wave of Conviction. Obviously, you don't want to drop any of these, but those are the easiest ones to drop. Can the player have mana issues when playing this build? In the leveling process, you're using a mana flask, and it's not really much of an issue. And late game, once you've done your Uber Lab, you get Essence Glutton. Now with this, it's honestly really good, and you have a large amount of mana. Useful leveling uniques for this build, there's not really that many uniques you really want, it's just your normal standard stuff. However, something that's really nice for leveling, especially in the Armageddon brand part, is getting 2 wands with +1 level of fire spell skill gems. Gotta remember that this is not socketed skill gems, even if you're using it and having your Armageddon brand in a tabula, that is getting +1 level. So it's a very big thing early on and pretty easy to get on an item level 2 one. As far as defenses and the tank on this build, we have really high spell suppression and we're block capped. And we actually have pure block cap as well. This is not with glancing. And something that's really nice as well is that once you get the recover 5% life when you block, you are incredibly tanky. This is so strong, and there's very little that takes this build down outside of gauntlet scenarios. On top of that, you also have leech and a little bit of regen for long fights, and you could use life flask. So for financial hurdles for this build, pretty much everything is really cheap, and that's part of what makes it a really strong league starter. Getting a great chest can be pretty hard, and a taste of hate is sometimes expensive. Taste of hate is really nice because it doesn't have the highest fist mitigation on the build, and being able to take some of that damage away from physical and taking it as cold damage instead, especially since we're gonna have 77 cold resist, that's gonna be really good. Other than that, this is a super solid starter, really good bosser, and it's a build that DsLily is absolutely mastered. So if you have any questions about the build, drop by her stream, check her out, and ask any questions there and she'll help you. Thank you so much to DsLily for making this build, and yeah, check her out. Awesome streamer. And thank you guys for watching the video. If you like these videos and they helped you out, sub to the channel, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.